There you are, I found you. You've got your first lesson ever coming up in just a little while. Time's running out, don't panic, don't fret. I'm going to give you a bunch of tips on how you can prepare for your first lesson. Before we go over that, make sure to click on that subscribe button. Okay, that's out of the way. Now let's head over to the school. New teachers, if you're interested in teaching abroad, check out our amazing TEFL certification course, The Language House. Your first lesson ever. So much anxiety, so much anticipation. While it's easy to study how to teach, actually doing it is a totally different thing, and there is so little in the way of training for your first class. In this video, I'm going to give you a bunch of tips from start to finish on how you can prepare for your first class, absolutely kill it, and make a wonderful impression on your new students. This video is more geared for language teachers, but at the same time, it can be used for any type of teaching interaction. So if you're a new teacher, or if you have a new teacher in your life who's about to step into the class for the first time, go ahead and share this video with them, because we're gonna be covering a lot of great info. With that, let's get to it. Let's start by going over two important fundamentals. Number one, who are your students? Obviously, it's important to know their level and the number of students in your class, but there's a few other things to consider. One is going to be the gender makeup. Is it mostly males? Is it mostly females? Another thing might be the age of your students. The third could be the nationality composition of your students. Is it one nationality? Is it a mix of different nationalities? And another thing to think of is their expectations. What type of class are you teaching? Is this a college class? Is it a discussions class? Is it a business class? Is it a test prep class? Knowing these things is going to change your approach. Fundamental number two, know where you're going to be teaching. Obviously know the location of your school, but I'm talking about the specific room. Each room is going to have different qualities. Some rooms are going to be large and spacious. Other rooms are going to be small and cramped. Some rooms will have a lot of extra resources and teaching tools. Other rooms aren't going to have anything. Knowing where you're going to work your magic is important, because it's going to change how you prepare. All right, we got our room. I've got a nice whiteboard in the back, some beautiful windows on the side over there, and what seems to be enough space for me to move around during the class for monitoring and group activities. The next thing that I'm going to do is a general inventory. So I should make sure that I have enough desks, chairs, I should know where the sockets are, I should check the lighting, and I should check the Wi-Fi to make sure it actually works. All right, so we did a full inventory and we're good to go. The next step is going to be arranging the desks for my liking. I think for the first lesson, I'm going to go with a horseshoe-shaped classroom. This allows all of the students to see each other and interact with each other. It also allows me to have full view of them. And I think it's good for when people are getting to know each other, rather than having the desks in rows or in columns or in islands. So let's set that up. Good, we got that done. If it's possible, spend a little bit of time here. The more comfortable you are with your teaching space, the better your performance is probably going to be. Some tips that I can give you are to bring in some personal belongings or some photos. Whatever you can do to spruce things up and to make things more interesting is a plus. I don't know if you need to sleep here. I think your colleagues will think that's kind of strange, but just spend a little bit of time here so you get a bit more comfortable. Okay, so let's start thinking about our first lesson. I wish there was a catch-all lesson that I could just give you all so that you could knock it out of the park, but each teacher is going to have a different circumstance. So it's impossible, basically, for a catch-all lesson. However, I can give you a variety of different tips. Number one is to have an engaging intro. Really think about the first couple minutes of your class and how you're going to grab your students and get them involved. This can be in the form of dressing up as a character or playing some sort of media or having a lot of pictures. Whatever it is, make it memorable, make it stand out, make it bold, make it daring. Get it where you know for sure that they're going to be surprised and they're gonna get into it. After this, segue into doing at least a couple of icebreakers, about 10 to 12 minutes worth, with these icebreakers, it's all about you getting to know your class and them getting to know each other. Make sure that your icebreakers are interactive, make sure that they're engaging, make sure that they have a lot of student talking time, so you're looking at group work and pair work, and stay away from just like the basics, like my name is. It's good to think outside the box a little bit and make these lessons fun. Icebreakers are done, we gotta go to the actual lesson. It's good now to stay away from game-like activities. Too many times on the first day of class, teachers don't want to really teach anything important, so they only do games, which I guess is kind of fun, but after about 40 minutes or an hour of those, many students might feel like there's not much to the actual class. So once you've done your icebreakers, move into something that has some substance to it, probably a Lexis lesson or a grammar lesson. But the main tip that I can give you is teach something that you feel comfortable teaching. Again, not a topic that's unique to you, but more like a language point or a grammar point that you feel comfortable with. If you try to shoot for the moon and teach something new, you might find yourself in a position where you're not really comfortable with things and you start making mistakes. So this lesson as well, like your icebreakers and like your intro, should still be engaging. It should still be fun. You should still have a lot of interactive group and pair work, along with, probably a productive part like a role play or a conversation that has a lot of student talking time and gets the students interacting with each other. Your teaching part throughout this whole lesson should probably only be about 10 to 15 minutes. If you find yourself up there lecturing, you're not doing it right. Now that you have planned all of that out, it's time for your closer. Too many times teachers spend the majority of their energy thinking about the beginning of the lesson and then the body of their lesson, and they neglect those last couple minutes. What you want to do is take a minute and think, like, how can I leave this first lesson on a super fun and engaging high note? Something that is going to be really memorable and that is going to leave them wanting more. Okay, so you've thought of some ideas for the lesson. Now we actually have to prepare it. Give yourself at least 24 hours before your lesson to come into the class and to get everything ready. Do not wait. Do not wait until the day of, because you might be really nervous and really stressed and it might fall apart. So again, 24 hours in advance, and this is going to give you time to make sure that you have things like flip chart paper, markers, pens, props, ways to cut, strips, whatever you need as far as printing and material creation. Give yourself enough time to actually complete it. And once you have that done, you're going to write it down all on your lesson plan, because if it's not on there, you're probably going to forget it. Before you teach, instead of sitting at home and staring at your lesson, it's wise to get up and actually practice it. So if your room is empty, or even at home, grab a colleague or a friend or even just yourself and work on the specific parts that require teaching skills. This can be things like volume or speed or graded language, or your gestures or your posture, or things like eliciting and CCQing. But definitely don't just stare at this, because this is not going to help you. Getting up and practicing it will. Okay, it's the big day. Some basic tips are to get to the school early, and then from there, what you're going to want to do is make sure you have everything. Obviously, have all of your materials ready to go. Make sure that you have your lesson plan handy as well. It's good to make name tags for yourself and your other students. If you're using flip chart paper, have that all rolled up. Keep track of time in some way via your phone or some sort of watch or a clock. Have a ball handy as an anchor for feedback and group work. Double check your markers, of course. And lastly, it's a good idea to have a clipboard so that you can monitor and error correct. Now, don't just sit in the corner as your students start entering into the classroom. Stand up, greet them, shake hands, be charismatic, say hello. You are the ambassador of communication. Be the teaching light that your students are looking for. Can you believe it? You're actually teaching now. A couple tips to consider when you're up in front of the classroom. Number one is to have your lesson plan handy. you're probably going to need to reference it a little bit, and you want to make sure that it's in front of you and it's easily readable. Tip number 2 is to keep your TTT, your echo, your running commentary, all of this extra language to a minimum. Try not to talk so much. Tip number 3, grade your language. Use language that your students understand. Try to stay away from complicated sentence structures and just vocabulary that is over their head. In that same lane, don't over-explain. Keep your instructions and your explanations to a minimum. Have some water with you because your mouth is going to get really dry. Elicit and concept check as much as possible. You're going to be doing this the majority of the time as a teacher. Next tip, keep track of time. You don't want your lessons to go over or under. If you run out of material and you still have 20 or so minutes left, this is the time that you're going to pull out some extra content that you've prepared in advance. Another tip is to use big gestures. Don't walk around the class like this with little pointy fingers. It's better to use your whole body to palm or gesture to your students. The visuals on it are so much better. Don't stand back here during group work. You're going to be monitoring and error correcting at all times. So take one of these with you, they help a lot. Tip number 10, I think. If you get into the weeds and your lesson has some problems, the best thing to do is to step back. Put your students in groups or pairs and have them do some sort of task. Try to get out of being the center of attention, especially if you're having some issues. Last and final tip is to exit gracefully. A lot of times when teachers reach their end of their lesson, they don't really know how to end it and it becomes this awkward goodbye. A good lesson ends with something like, "Thanks so much everyone, it was nice to meet you, see you all next, blah, 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 blah. Have a wonderful day." That's it. The thing with all of these tips is that they can and should be practiced in advance. You can work on all of these things before you even get into the classroom. What you want is that when your students first meet you, your first lesson is a well-oiled machine. So take the time in advance, work on these things, and then when you're teaching in your class, make sure you're executing them. My final piece of advice is to remember to have fun. This is exciting. Your students are rooting for you. They want you to do well. If worse comes to worse, if you don't pull it off completely, you always have other lessons to improve. So with that, I wish you good luck and let me know how it went in the comments. Thanks so much, everyone. Take care.